All right, I'm going to let a couple seconds go by because this tends to skip in the beginning. I don't know if it's going to actually skip in the beginning, but it usually does. So I wait about 20 seconds, 15. Okay. Chapter 5 Mucking It Up. Part 1 The Conway Trial. Onyx awoke at 4 next morning, blinking his eyes in the dark like flickering purple lightning bugs. Laying still under his sheets, wrapped in a blanket of stillness and peace. Gazing straight up, he sighed, grinning. Today shall be my day, he whispered. He kissed the purple orb toy next to him before tossing the wretched thing to the corner. He stood, clicked on his lamp, drudging through his morning exercises, drank some water, getting himself ready. He snatched his coin of accomplishment off his back wall desk, stuffing the coin to his pocket of his black and purple checkered suit. Grabbing the Conway file, he was off. Tugging his collar, rolling his coin of accomplishment in his pocket, dreadfully hoping that today was the day. He arrived at the Justice Center a short while later, two big burly minders pushing reporters back, parting a sea of cameras and microphones poking in Onyx's path. Opening the side door for Onyx slipped through the opening. Striding down the building's gothic black mirror corridor, glancing at the wall and at his wiggling purple eyes peeking back at him. Echoing happy chatter down the halls, Onyx arrived at the attorney waiting room, waiting alone for the trial to begin, glancing at his watch, tapping his foot nervously before tilting to the fat purple sphere lingering in the front upper corner. He snarled at the sphere, when suddenly, a rapping at the door nearest the sphere. Yes, he said, fervently hoping it was Bruce coming to save the day. Onyx ready to forgive Bruce for all Bruce's misgivings, though it was Lindy Lynn who opened the door and whose pale face bobbed in. He bounced his chin up at her. She sighed, glancing down. It's time, she said softly, raising up at him. He huffed out his nose, nodding at her as she stepped back out the room, patting the door closed. He spun around, snatching the Conway file, opening a door opposite the one Lindy peeked in from. Down a dim and narrow, glossy black mirror corridor he went, fans thumping and cheering above him, music playing louder up ahead, vibrating walls, louder and louder as he approached the door at the corridor's end. He froze. Rainbowing strobe lights seeped around edges of the doorframe, coloring the black mirror immediately in front of him, music thumping in his chest, cheers and cries from a roaring audience just on the door's other side. He yanked out his coin of accomplishment, cupping the coin, admiring its sparkling shadow. He smirked, narrowing his eyes, clasping his fist, suffocating the coin. Bury them, he said wickedly. He stuffed the coin away, took a breath, exhaled, and at the same time swung the door open, lights flooding in. He swaggered out the door, into an arena that erupted in cheer. Brooks! 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 Though meanwhile, however, far off to the south, within the lush foliage borders of Dambit, and just within that city's near northeast corner, a black man wearing a black fedora hat and plaid button-up shirt, sitting in a fuzzy brown recliner, firing up a cigar while sipping coffee. A stone fire pit crackled and snapped a blazing flame. A woman who had bright green eyes, sitting in a second recliner to the man's left, nestled in her black quilt, sipping her coffee. Shadows danced across her dolly caramel face, creaking from the recliner as the black fedora man sat up, reaching to his right. An old brown and arching jukebox-shaped radio standing pressed against the wood-planked wall. In the radio center was a shiny round knob, one surrounded by a wide wicker ring of speaker. He pressed the knob, and then twisted it. Nothing but static over the speakers. He twisted the knob more, static fading, and the roar of a grizzly bear suddenly blared out the radio. Brah! Keepers Murphy, the man exclaimed, spinning the knob. The roar got quiet before fading out completely. There, that's better, he grumbled. She nodded at the same time voices spoke over the speaker. You're tuning into Whoa 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 Wild 97.2, the Do Bear, followed by a second lighthearted happy voice. A good morning, Metroland, said Chip Chestnut, one of the radio hosts. Chippity Chip Chestnut here, Chip continued. Coming at you live from the Courtroom Arena in downtown Metroland, covering the highly anticipated competition between Metroland's very own two Pox, Onyx Brooks and Captain Kevin Ace. The black fedora man rolled his eyes as Chip continued over the speaker. Broadcasting the trial alongside me today is my longtime buddy and sidekick, the salamander himself, Sammy Slinks, groaning over the speaker. Say hello to the folks listening in from work. Slinks, said Chip, once again groaning. Slinks, you all right, buddy? Muttered Chip, groaning. I think I'm going to be sick, replied Sammy Slinks, speaking in a groggy nature. Slinks, whispered Chip. Blah. Whoa, Chip exclaimed. Look out now, folks. The salamander just yacked in the broadcasting booth. Gross, Chip elaborated, groaning. I feel better, said Sammy. You nervous about the trial, Slinks? Replied Chip. Nah, Sammy said. I just partied a little too hard with the babes down at Creamy's Palace last night, scoffing over the radio. Keepers, Slinks. Creamy's on a Sunday? Bleeping A right on a Sunday, Sammy announced. Keepers, Slinks. We got kids listening in this morning, said Chip. So, replied Sammy. So, you're going to get us in trouble again, dude, Sammy scoffed. Sorry about you, Sammy replied. The black fedora man scoffed, chuckling, slapping his knee. Shit, I love how that boy Sammy Slinks always speaks his mind, he said to the green-eyed woman. He's a bit of a potty mouth, if you ask me, she replied, snippy. He huffed. Well, you would know, he said. She scoffed, sticking her nose up. The fuck I would, said she. A deep, gravelly bellow as he chuckled at her and twisted the volume up. And the crowd of 25,000 is all on their feet, said Chip excitedly. Clapping and paying respects to Lord Charlie Orne entering the courtroom, taking a seat at the judge's bench, Chip continued. Nothing but mad proper up here, my lord. Sammy added. There was a pause, Chip's breath sighing over the speakers. You got some brown stuff on your nose there, Slinks, said Chip. I do? Where? I don't feel it. Oh, it's there all right, added Chip continued. Sammy chuckled. Probably from last night, said Sammy. Gross, replied Chip. What? Sammy said, presumably shrugging, though the black fedora man couldn't tell. Anyhow, said Chip, for those of you who haven't been to the courtroom arena before, which I'm sure not many of you have, Chip continued before. I know I haven't, Sammy added for good measure. Shut up, Slinks, you're here now, replied Chip. And then Chip explained to the listening audience the following. That a ringing black mirror wall, roughly as tall as two privacy fences stacked atop each other, looped around the well of the courtroom. Starting at the top of the wall, however, were row upon row of stadium seating laddering 30 rows over the courtroom and thus overlooking the same. The arena looked something similar to a world-class tennis court, was the best illustration that Chip could give. And in fact, such an illustration had been the best and most accurate and spot-on description that anyone could have ever given. Ever. Chip described all this, howbeit Chip didn't describe everything, but nor could Chip from where Chip was seated. For immediately to Chip and Sammy's right, there stood what could only be described as a ridiculously tall black mirror obelisk structure, punching out the south wall like a pillaring block, towering up from behind the judge's bench, all the way up to into the murky shadows, and presumably onto the ceiling after that, which was a domed ceiling, by the way. Though at the center of the obelisk structure, however, lingered something else, something ominous, malignant, and malevolent, for it was the biggest, fattest, and most devilish-looking fat purple sphere that anyone had ever seen. Bubbling out the black mirror, almost like the moon, the sphere overlooked them all with contempt as Sammy took over the speaker. And it looks like the city's prosecutor, Dick Stroopy, is coming out the courtroom next. Crowd doesn't seem too excited about it, added Chip. No, they sure as bleep don't, and I can't blame him, replied Sammy. Orrin, smashing his gavel to the bench, whispered Chip like a golf announcer. The radio silenced. Crackling flames from the fire pit, both the black fedora man and green-eyed girl sipped their coffee as Chip suddenly picked back up. I'm not really sure to describe what's happening here, folks, said Chip. A group of 12 people in line coming out the side door into the courtroom, and they're all wearing what appeared to be pantyhose over their heads, Chip continued. Those are the keys, Chippy. The peeps deciding Conway's fate, commented Sammy. Oh, okay. Well, why are they wearing pantyhose? Replied Chip. Those aren't pantyhose, you dumb bleeping turkey, said Sammy. Don't call me a turkey, Slink. You know how much I hate that. Those are called sculpies, replied Sammy, literally not missing a beat. Sculpies? Replied Chip. Sure, to hide each key's identity, Sammy answered. So no one knows who the guilty vote was. Because it only takes one guilty vote, and it'll all be over for Mr. Conway, Sammy illustrated, just in case others weren't certain. Why are they all sitting in the elevated area? Replied Chip. That's called the key box, Chipster, where the keys are going to watch the trial from. Wow, Slinks, how do you know all this? Said Chip. Sammy scoffed, chuckling. I've seen every episode of Code and Conduct, Sammy said. Chip scoffed. You're going to end up on Code and Conduct if you keep hanging out at Creamy's, said Chip. Sammy chuckled like a goof. Yeah, bleeping probably, Sammy admitted. And here we go, folks, Chip exclaimed, so abruptly it caused both the black fedora man and green-eyed girl to jump. Dick Stroopy, informing the court that the prosecution's ready to call his first witness, Chip continued. Let's take it down to our hot mics down in the courtroom, whispered Chip. Dick Stroopy, slithering up to a wood podium standing smack in the center of the courtroom, facing the witness stand, which was tucked next to the black marble judge's bench. The podium chest-high to most people, howbeit chin-high to Dick Stroopy, as Dick peeked over it, and at the big burly minder wearing a tight powder blue uniform sitting in the witness stand. Silence over the speaker until, state your name for the record, haunt Dick Stroopy, whose first name, quite frankly, tells us all we need to know about the greasy little weasel. Squeaking springs from the witness stand as the minder adjusted. The name's Billy Blunt. Sergeant Billy Blunt, if he wants to get technical about it, bellowed the biggest, hardiest, and hairiest and hardiest-looking minder of them all, a true veteran of the MM and a cannonball of a man, Sergeant Billy Blunt, the sergeant's hands as big as barrel lids, clasping the armrest where the sergeant was seated. You know why you're here, don't you, Sergeant? Continued Dick Stroopy, leading the witness. I do, grunted the sergeant, who spoke in a deep, croaky voice like a bullfrog. I'm here talking about the conspiracy and the theft of Lord Orrin's book, the sergeant elaborated. Very good, Sergeant. Tell us about that then, replied Dick. It all happened around the time I started my shift. In late day, bellowed Sergeant Blunt, whose voice, by the way, carried extremely well throughout the domed arena. It was the Ready Center. I was in the Ready Center, getting some things ready for the execution that evening, the sergeant continued. Tell us what happens next, replied Dick. Well, I got a call over my radio, a code call, which means that there's been a code violation in the area. And after that, I started looking around there, which was where I was. And I seen Private Conway just standing there in the corner. He was frozen. He was a shaking. Brilliantly. Bellowed Sergeant Blunt, glancing at the gawking crowd leaning over the courtroom. I seen a guy wearing a black fedora hat and a silver trench coat, holding Lord Orrin's book. The black fedora man glancing at the green-eyed girl, smirking at her. She glared silently at him. He tugged his collar, and as Dick Stroopy screeched over the speaker, "Which book?" said Dick. Lord Orrin's Keeper's Desk reference, replied Sergeant Blunt, mumbling throughout the arena, heard over the speaker. Okay, Sergeant, said Dick. You see the man in the black fedora running and holding Lord Orrin's book. What happens next? Dick continued. Lord Orrin, meanwhile, drumming all 5 fingers to the bench, practically bored to death, while Sergeant Blunt let out a grunt. "I seen the black fedora guy running past Private Conway," said Sergeant Blunt. "Did Private Conway attempt to seize or to stop the man wearing the black fedora?" squawked the prosecutor. "Bah, no," murmuring from the audience as Dick flashed a pretentious smirk, and who whisked around like a prima donna, carelessly flapping a hand. "No for the question," said Dick, who, by the way, no one cared for. "Anyhow," said Chip. Looks like," Chip continued before Sammy interjected. "Looks like it's the defense team's turn for cross-examination," spouted Sammy. "And the crowd on their feet, clapping," Sammy continued. "Yep, there he is, folks, standing from the table," said Chip. "He's the greatest go-getter Metroland's ever seen," added Sammy. "One mad, proper dude," Sammy continued. "Winner of all the generals," said Chip. "Taker of all victories," Chip continued. "The pain train himself," Sammy went on. "The dweller in the dark," continued Chip. "5-time Metro Magazine's Person of the Year," Sammy remarked. "Mr. Metro himself," Chip went on. "Onyx Brooks," they both chorused through the radio. "And the crowd goes wild." "Ah," Chip continued for good measure. "You don't need to fake the sound, Slinks. They're already cheering," replied Chip. "Bleep you, guy. Loosen up a little, will you?" Chip sighed through the speaker, while Sammy continued. "Bleep that guy's bleeping cool." "Cool as the other side of the pillow, Slinks," replied Chip. "Let's listen in from our hot mics down in the courtroom," Chip continued, as Mr. Brooks begins his cross-examination of Sergeant. "Oh!" exclaimed Sammy over Chip. "And it looks like Onyx Brooks just decimated Sergeant Blunt with a single question." "Wow!" Sammy exclaimed. Lord Orrin slamming his gavel, Chip added. "And the whole bleeping place is going crazy," continued Sammy excitedly. "Onyx Brooks taking a seat back at the table," continued Chip. "And Sergeant Blunt now exiting the courtroom," Chip went on. "And he looks like a terrified puppy," said Sammy. How would you know what a terrified puppy looks like, Slinks?" There was a pause, a long pause. "Slinks?" Chip mumbled through the speaker, humming white noise over the radio. Both the black fedora man and green-eyed woman glanced at each other. But suddenly, "Well, all right, let's take it back down to the hot mics in the courtroom," blurted Sammy out the speaker. Chip, meanwhile, sighed. "Let's listen in as the city of Metroland calls its next witness," Sammy whispered. And witness after witness the prosecution did call, though witness after witness annihilated, as Onyx Brooks got a hold of them on cross-examination, discrediting the witness by asking questions such as, "I say, if you weren't in the Ready Center at the time this all supposedly happened, then what in keeper's name are you doing here?" The witness, a rotund, burly minder by the name Major Macy Morose, shrugged in her seat as she replied, "I don't know." To which Onyx said, "No further questions." Onyx probing witness with inquiries such as, "Tell us, Sergeant Gurley, if you neglected to draft a report over this matter, then how can you be absolutely certain you're not getting your facts mixed up?" Well, I can't," blurted Sergeant Gurley, curling a lip out. Onyx probing witnesses, such as the time he had the following exchange with the only scraggly string-bean minder in the force, Lieutenant Larry. "You never witnessed Private Conway speaking to the black fedora man, did you?" said Onyx. No," replied Larry in a nasally voice. "Then how can you honestly tell these keys that you're certain Mr. Conway conspired with this black fedora man?" continued Onyx. Larry nodded. "I cannot," the lieutenant promptly replied. "Tell us, Lieutenant," continued Onyx. "What color was the black fedora man's trench coat?" Silver," answered Lieutenant Larry. Onyx smirked, spinning around. "No further questions," he announced. "He crossed witness after witness, I tell you, ruthlessly at times, though after 7 long hours, the trial at last reached its final witness. Your Honor," honked Dick Stroopy from the podium. "The city calls Captain Kevin Ace to the stand," Dick continued, mumbling in clamor over the speaker. "The place just got dim, strobe lights weaving all over the place," said Sammy. "The courtroom side door opening," added Chip. "And there he is," Sammy exclaimed. "Captain Kevin Ace marching out the side door like a Spartan entering the courtroom," Sammy illustrated. "What a spectacle," commented Chip. "Bleep, that guy's jacked," added Sammy. Ace, flashing his movie star smile, continued Sammy, strutting like a champ across the courtroom's blue carpet, waving at everyone. "Folks, this place is going nuts," cried Chip. "The ladies love it," Sammy added. Ace, smacking both biceps of the audience, Sammy continued. "And oh, bleep, Chip, look," Sammy went on. "Wow, folks, will you look at that?" said Chip. A guy wearing a blue dress shirt and gold tie, leaping off the looping black wall, dropping down into the courtroom," Chip explained. "The guy's making a bull rush for the captain," shouted Sammy. Ace, stopping, spinning to the man, said Chip, captivated. "And Ace just picked the man up," exclaimed Sammy. "Folks, Ace is trolling the man over his head like a helicopter," Chip said. "And the crowd absolutely loves it," added Sammy. Ace, resting the man down, Chip continued. Ace hugging the man, Chip. "Both Ace and the man waving at the audience and going crazy," Sammy went on. "And Lord Orrin slamming his gavel at the bench," yelled Chip. Order in the damn court," roared Orrin in an angry and impatient manner. Lord Orrin telling the audience to shut up, which they're doing, whispered Chip to the speaker. "And the same goes for you two dipshits up there," shouted Orrin, pointing the gavel up and in the direction of the Dewey Brothers broadcasting bench. Orrin, calling some of the fans dipshits for some reason, Chip whispered. "And Ace stepping up to the judge's bench, getting sworn in, having a seat in the witness stand," Chip explained. "Dick Stroopy, standing like a stump at the podium, coughing," Chip continued. "And let's take you down to the hot mics," stated Sammy. Dick Stroopy, pussyfooting around the podium like a well-dressed gremlin, hacking into a fist. "State your name for the record," honked Dick. The strapping, stout young captain sat tall and robust in the witness chair as the captain replied in a swaggering bass voice, "Good morning. My name is Kevin Ace," said Ace like a soothing thunder throughout the arena. "Captain, what do you do for a living?" replied Dick. "I'm the captain of the MM, the Metro Miners Force," answered Ace. Sammy, meanwhile, scoffed. "I'm telling you, folks," said Sammy. "If there's one thing I've learned from the Code and Conduct series," continued Sammy, "is that Metroland prosecutors, well, they're really only taught two things in prosecution school. First, how to ask a witness what happens next, and second, they learn how to club helpless little puppies with bats. That's what I've seen anyway. Not that I ever seen puppies getting beaten with bats before. That's just what I heard. Not that I talk about that kind of stuff with other people or anything. I mean, sure, it comes up in conversation from time to time, but..." There was a pause over the radio until, "Slinks," said Chip. "Yeah, Chipster? Stop being a turkey." The speakers muffled as Sammy scoffed, and Chip continued. "Back to the hot mic." Dick Stroopy asking Captain Ace what happens next a whole bunch of times, Ace, however, providing descriptive and reasonable answers, and Ace illustrations went exactly like this. That Ace was in the Ready Center on the day in question, that Captain Ace had seen Private Conway in the Ready Center, and that Captain Ace knew Conway would be there. After all, Ace had been the one who assigned Conway to the Ready Center guard duty 3 months prior. Captain Ace also claimed that it was soon after that he arrived at the Ready Center that he observed Private Conway, standing in uniform, huddled alone in the far corner. Ace explained that Conway had a nervous demeanor, trembling almost, suspicious to say the least, according to Captain Ace anyway, based off Captain Ace's training and experience, of course. "And what happens next?" Dick Stroopy looked true to his own training. "Well," said Ace, taking a breath before explaining this, the Captain Ace had seen Private Conway glancing around a lot, nervously, like Conway was making sure no one was watching or something. Ace then told everyone that he had witnessed Conway shaking hands with another man, a man wearing a black fedora hat and trench coat. That Conway and the man in the black fedora were apparently having some kind of a conversation. They were nodding their heads at each other in agreement before the black fedora man wandered off into the building. "What happens next?" blurted Dick. According to Captain Ace, the next thing that happened was nothing, because Ace didn't think anything of it at first. There were plenty of other miners on duty at the Ready Center that day, Ace detailed. Miners getting the things ready for the execution that night. Everything appeared normal, is what Ace told them. Normal, that is until... What? That is until what, Captain? Tell us. What happens next? Said Dick. "I would if you let me, buddy," replied Ace, nice enough. "Oh, sorry, go ahead," responded Dick, blushing pink like a pig. Captain Ace, meanwhile, explained the following. Sirens went off, is what Ace told everyone. Sirens, and the whole Ready Center fell into a panic. Men running for doors screaming, women strutting in heels shouting, the whole Ready Center bottom level in absolute chaos. "And what happens next?" Dick interrupted. "I saw something through the crowd," replied Ace, calm and poised, though who appeared to be choking up. "Now, Captain," Dick said softly, patting the podium, "this may be difficult for you to talk about, but tell us, what did you see through the crowd?" Dick said. Ace sniffed, took a deep breath, and whose seemingly armor-plated chest ballooned out. "I saw someone's collar glowing red," Ace announced. Gasped from the ringing around the audience. Why, one man in the nosebleed sections even threw up, though thankfully into a puke bag. Keepers forbid the man would have vomited on the glassy black mirror. "Captain," said Dick, flaccid. "Whose collar was it that was glowing red that day?" Dick continued. Ace's python for an arm rose, as Ace stabbed a finger out towards defense counsel's table, and specifically at Mr. Conway sitting next to Onyx. "Him," said Ace, pointing at Mr. Conway. Clamor throughout the arena, Orin slamming the gavel. Settle down now, everyone," said Orin. "Dick, you can continue," Orin added. Dick nodded. "I only have a few more questions, sir," replied Dick. Orin, however, scoffed. "Keepers, Dick, I don't give a shit how many questions you have. Just ask the damn questions and stop wasting time. We don't have all damn day, you know," said Orin. Dick nodded, and whose chin dipped and whose bottom lip quivered, as if his wife and kids leaving him last week weren't bad enough. Now Dick Stroopy was on the verge of not getting his conviction, and he had to deal with Lord Orin's sour attitude all day to boot. "Did you see the fedora man leave the Ready Center?" mumbled Dick. "I did," replied Ace. "Tell us about that," Dick continued. "Well, he was holding Lord Orin's book, the Keeper's Death Reference, the most important book in all Fable Valley, and the black fedora guy went rushing past Conway and out the door," said Ace. The black fedora man, meanwhile, picking something up from off the plank wooden floor, resting the object to his lap, glancing at the green-eyed woman. He thumped the object's hard black cover, a cover with purple words arching across it, and the words said, "Keeper's Death Reference." He smirked, puffing a red-orange ember and gray smoke from his cigar, and Dick spoke over the radio. "Was Mr. Conway in a position to stop the black fedora man?" To which Captain Ace replied, "He was." "No further questions at this time," replied Dick, lurching around droopy-faced, moping back to the prosecution table. Suddenly, all the lights went out. The black fedora man glanced at the woman, dipping his chin at her. "This is it, eh?" he grumbled, twisting the volume up. She nodded, serious, tugging her collar, violently picking at her sparkling purple nails, digging into them deep. A bubbling speck of hot pink liquid oozed out from under her fingernail. She gasped under her breath, wiping the pink speck away before the black fedora man could see it. That's the end of part 1. Whew. Just take about 10 more seconds and start part 2. Part 2. Onyx Brooks versus Captain Kevin Ace. "And hot doggy, here we go," screamed Sammy over the radio. "The whole bleeping place just blacked the bleep out," continued Sammy. "People chattering like they do when this kind of stuff happens," added Chip. Electric trumpets muffled out the speaker, colorful rainbow spotlights fingering like fingers looping around the nosebleed seats, forming an umbrella over everyone. At once the lights restricted, pinching inward like a claw to a stuffed toy, honing in on the courtroom below, where the dozens of spotlights formed into two. One spotlight over the podium, while the second spotlight got busy beaming over Captain Kevin Ace sitting in the witness chair. Glistening Ace's slick and swoopy black hair, Captain Ace seemingly blinked out of existence, or so that's how the captain felt, sitting alone under the spotlight, like being stranded on an island in a sea of nothingness. Electric music blaring and thumping Onyx's chest. A voice over the loudspeaker spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Onyx Brooks." Onyx slinked under the light at the podium, and the dome about popped off the building, or at least that's how Sammy Slinks described it. Onyx flashing his polished checkmark smile, waving like a politician to the crowd in the dark. He felt like he was standing dry in a rumbling rain all of a sudden. Screams like whistling firecrackers all around, roaring applause like an earthquake, vibrating the podium. Suddenly, Lord Orin slammed the gavel. "Order in the damn court," screamed Orin. Like a child in trouble, the audience fell to a hush. Onyx, meanwhile, snickered, smirking, wagging his head and glancing at his notes resting atop the podium. "Mr. Brooks," said Orin. Onyx glanced up, Orin grumbling and glaring at him. "You may inquire," continued Orin. Onyx nodded, pressing his lips before suddenly snapping his gaze at Captain Ace. The black doorman and Dammit, meanwhile, huffed and exhaled, while the green-eyed girl did the same. "Captain Ace," said Onyx, loud and confident. "You've been testifying for roughly an hour now, haven't you?" he continued. Ace frowned, curling a lip out. "I guess I haven't been keeping track of the time," replied Ace, shrugging. "And in that hour, you've told us quite a lot about what you supposedly witnessed on the day in question, right?" said Onyx. "I stated the facts that happened, yeah," replied Ace. "And you gave us specific details, didn't you?" "Yeah." It wasn't just like you told us some 5-minute story, fair to say?" "Yeah, that's fair, I guess." "I say, you told us the facts, as you claimed them to be, because you took part in the investigation of this case, didn't you?" "I did. I wouldn't be here if I didn't," said Ace. "Did you leave any important facts out?" replied Onyx, quick. Said the captain, glancing up. I don't think so." "You don't think so?" scoffed Onyx. "Well, could you give me an example?" said Ace. "An example?" Onyx scoffed. "You're asking me about the facts? Captain, you were the one who supposedly witnessed these facts, aren't you?" he continued. Ace shrugged, Onyx pulling a lip back, wagging his head. "So tell us," he said, soft and elegant. "Did you leave out any important facts or not?" "I mean, as far as I know, I didn't," answered Ace. "Who was the lead investigator in this case?" said Onyx. "Sergeant Blunt." "Right. And Sergeant Blunt took the lead, partly because Sergeant Blunt was at the Ready Center that day, true?" said Onyx. "Yeah, that's part of the reason, I guess." "Partly because Sergeant Blunt claimed to have witnessed the events that took place, too, right?" Onyx went on. "Yeah, that's part of it." "Partly because Sergeant Blunt is a high-ranking minder, isn't that correct?" "Yeah," said Ace, squinting and acting confused, though who wasn't. "But you were at the Ready Center that day, weren't you?" continued Onyx. "I was." "You allegedly observed what happened, right?" "I did observe what happened, yeah. And in fact, you're the highest-ranking minder of them all, aren't you?" "I am," said Ace. "So why didn't you take the lead to conduct the investigation?" replied Onyx. "Well, there are a lot of reasons why I might not take the lead for a particular investigation." "I'm talking about this investigation, Captain," Onyx firmly interjected. "This one, the only one relevant to the proceedings. Here," he continued. "Oh," said Ace. There was a pause. "So," Onyx continued, "why didn't you take the lead?" "In this case?" replied Ace. "Yes, in this case. Are you joking me?" "No," said Ace. "I was just wanting to make sure. I'm being accurate, buddy," continued Ace. "Great, be accurate then. Tell us, why didn't you take the lead in this case?" "Because," said Ace, "I wasn't on duty when it all went down," mumbling around the arena. "You weren't on duty? Is that what you said?" asked Onyx. "Yeah." Chattering grew louder. Orin slamming the gavel, telling everyone to settle it down now, everyone, before Onyx continued. "And you didn't think it was important to tell for the keys to consider whether or not you were on duty when this supposedly happened," he said. Ace shrugged. "I didn't think it was important. It doesn't change anything." "Ma, it doesn't, does it?" "No." Onyx bouncing his chin up. "Why am I the one who had to drag that fact out of you?" said he. "You didn't drag it out of me." "Then why didn't you outright tell us from the start that you weren't on official minder duty that day?" "No one asked." Onyx scoffed, slapping the podium, laughter under his breath. Captain Ace, however, tugging his own collar. "You're telling me," Onyx said, "that you won't tell us about specific facts and details unless I ask?" Ace shrugged, nodding. "What if I don't realize a fact?" Onyx continued. "Because I wasn't there, Captain. How am I supposed to ask about a fact that I didn't witness nor could be aware of?" Onyx continued. "I don't know. That's not my job," replied Ace matter-of-factly. "Right. Your job is to be a successful minder, isn't it?" replied Onyx. "It's everyone's job to be successful," answered Ace. "Yes, and in your case specifically, to be a successful minder, right?" "Yeah." "Tell us, does a successful minder lie about facts or to a case?" "No," said Ace. "Do successful minders draft reports regarding their investigations?" "In every single instance? Is that what you're asking?" said Ace. Onyx scoffed, wagging his head. "Let me ask you this instead," he said. "Drafting a report over investigation, that's a prudent thing to do, wouldn't you agree?" Yeah, I guess. In fact, drafting a report over an investigation, that's rule number 1 in your miner's policies and procedures manual, isn't it? It is, said Ace. Did you draft a report regarding this investigation, Captain? Ace huffed. No. Gasped around the arena. Tell us, why didn't you? Continued Onyx. I mean, I don't remember, buddy. It was a year ago. And in that year, you never once bothered or found time to draft a report? I'm a busy guy. What can I say? Said Ace. Everyone's busy in Metroland, don't you agree? Replied Onyx. Ace shrugged and got silent for a moment. Don't you agree, Captain? Or are you the only person that's busy around here? Said Onyx. Ace snared. Yeah, everyone's busy, said Ace. And yet, you had enough free time to conduct a charity event that day at the Ready Center, didn't you, Captain? I was just trying to be productive in my off time. And this event was a charity, a meet and greet for Dambit Youths, correct? Said Onyx. It was, replied Ace. Specifically, these youths were from the Keeper's House program. Am I right? Onyx continued. Ace shrugged. Yeah, Ace responded. And you care for those children, don't you? Even though they're not your own, you care for them? Said Onyx. I mean, yeah, replied Ace. Tell us, why do you care for them so much? Because, replied Ace, they all have potential. They're important. And I've never been a Danby myself, so I figured I'd learn something from the kids, too. And these kids, Onyx continued, they range from 7 to 12 years old. Fair to say? Ace nodded. That's my understanding. And they were all a little intimidated to be in Metroland, too. Wouldn't you agree? Said Onyx. Ace shrugged. I don't know about intimidated, said Ace. Onyx scoffed. Are you saying the presence of our keepers doesn't intimidate children? He said. No, said Ace, eager. The children were intimidated. I remember now. They were, continued Ace. You and the children were on the Ready Center's main lower level, weren't you? We were. You were all stationed at a table, kind of a booth area, right? Yeah, that's right. And the area, that's clear across the room from where Mr. Conway was, right? Said Onyx. Yeah, I guess. Now, most of us have seen the inside of the Ready Center before, said Onyx. But for those of us who haven't, you would agree that the Ready Center's main ground level is nothing more than a wide and open room. Fair to say? Yeah, it's fair. That's a fair description. And you and the children were on the north side of the room, weren't you? Said Onyx. We were, replied Ace. Private Common was on the south side of the room, right? As far as I recall, he was. There are 4 exits on the bottom level, right? Yeah, replied Ace. One exit door in the center of each of the room's 4 outer walls. Am I right? Said Onyx. Yeah, 1 exit for each wall, replied Ace. And isn't it true that the booth you and the children were at had been stationed near the north wall exit? Yeah, I believe so, answered Ace. Now, there was an execution set to take place that night, wasn't there? There was. And this whole incident took place about an hour before the execution began, right? Said Onyx. Maybe about that, yeah, replied Ace. Well, at the time the sirens went off, the Ready Center was busy, wasn't it? A lot of people were there, right? Yeah, it was pretty busy. You said there was a panic, didn't you? Said Onyx. Yeah, once the sirens went off, there was a panic. People running all over the place, screaming, fair to say? Said Onyx. Yeah, that's fair. Pretty standard when the sirens go off. People running for the exit doors, true? Continued Onyx. I don't know where they were trying to run to, replied Captain Ace. But fair to say most have been running towards the exits, right? Continued Onyx. Ace shrugged, frowning. Probably a fair inference, said Ace. Okay, all right. Let me back up for a moment, Onyx stated, striding a step back from the podium, though still under the spotlight. Do you have any personal interests in this case? He continued. Personal interests? No. You're telling us that it doesn't matter to you one way or the other who or what the outcome of this trial is, right? Said Onyx. Personally, it doesn't matter to me, answered Ace. Are you sure? I mean, yeah, why would I lie about that? Isn't it true, Captain, that last week you won an MTL competition? I did. Spars clapped, fluttering out the dark, while Onyx slapped his hands. So, you've won exactly 197 general awards, right? He said. Ace glanced up, apparently thinking, before dropping back to Onyx. Yeah, that's right, said Ace. And with such a win, you broke Don Shadow's record of only 196, true? Replied Onyx. Yeah, that's what I understand it to be. Mr. Shadow set the bar pretty high, though. But you still broke his record, didn't you? Yeah, I did, said Ace. You have only 2 more general awards to win before you're major award eligible. Isn't that right? Got to win all the generals before you can win the major, answered Ace. Because those are the rules, correct? Said Onyx. Yeah, correct. Those are the rules. Our keeper's rules, right? Onyx continued. Just like them all. Tell us, Captain, what's the purpose of winning so many general awards like you have? Said Onyx. Well, you're required to win all the generals before you can win the major. And if you win the major, Onyx continued. Actually, if anyone wins the major, Onyx went on, that means that whoever that person is, they must have a total of 200 awards, right? That's right. Those are the rules, replied Ace. So why are you winning so many general awards, Captain? What's the point? Because I want to win the major. And what happens when one wins the major? Said Onyx. They're deemed successful by our keepers, replied Ace. You said you wanted to win the major, right? Do you expect to win it? Onyx continued. Ace scoffed. Of course I do. That's what being successful is all about. And you want to be successful, don't you? Well, obviously. Winning the major makes you successful, right? I mean, yeah, but, said Ace. But tell me, what if someone else wins the major first? Can you still win it then? Spouted Onyx over Ace. Ace shrugged. No, not if someone else already won it. Again, the game will be over, Ace explained. No, not if someone already else won it. Then the game would be over, Ace explained. So if someone else wins the major, that means you cannot win it, right? Just so I'm understanding things correctly. Yeah, that's right. But you plan on winning the major, don't you? Said Onyx. Yeah, I just told you that. And you win the major by winning comps, don't you? Ace scoffed, shrugging. I mean, maybe, said Ace. You've heard this trial being a competition, haven't you? You've heard of this trial being a competition, haven't you? Replied Onyx. Ace scoffed. I heard people referring to it as a competition, yeah, but not an MTL one. In fact, Onyx interjected, you heard Tom Dibble refer to it as a competition, didn't you? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I heard that from Tom Dibble in the news, replied Ace. And Tom Dibble made such an announcement last Tuesday, correct? Said Onyx. Yeah, I believe so, replied Ace. Onyx clapped. Now then, Captain, let me ask you this, he said. How many individuals in Metroland have more general awards than you? Only one, said Ace. And how many awards does that individual have over you? 2. Isn't it true that particular individual is major award eligible? Ace snarled. Yeah, it is, grumbled Ace past pressed lips. You guess? Replied Onyx, staggering. Is it true or not, Captain? He continued. Yeah, it's true, the captain replied. And it isn't also true that the individual that individual is the only person in all this galaxy to have such eligibility, right? As far as I know, yeah. And presumably, that individual wins the major by winning a competition. Is that fair to say? Ace shrugged. No one knows exactly how to win the major, said Ace. Sure, Onyx replied. But, well, isn't it? It's not out of this world to say that in order to win the major, you must first win a particular competition, right? I don't know if that's true, replied Ace. Well, let me ask you this then, Captain, Onyx interrupted. How do you win the generals? He inquired. By winning MTL competitions. Competitions, right? Said Onyx. Yeah, MTL ones, replied Ace. But your testimony is that no one is exactly sure how to win the major, right? Is that what you're telling us? Yeah, that's correct, said Ace. And since we don't know, isn't it reasonable to assume that since winning competitions wins you all the generals, that winning a competition might win you the major too? Well, isn't it, Captain? Isn't that reasonable? Onyx continued excitedly. I mean, it's reasonable, I guess, but I can't for certain say it's true. So it might be true, right? Yeah, it might be, said Ace. And so, if that individual who's major award eligible wins a competition, that individual might win the major as a result. Isn't that right? Spouted Onyx. Yeah, maybe. What happens if that individual wins the major, let's say today, said Onyx? Then that person will be deemed successful, I guess, replied Ace. It also means that you personally would no longer have a chance at winning that said major, would you? No, I wouldn't. Not in that case, replied Ace. But you plan on winning the major, right? Said Onyx. Ace shrugged. You told us earlier that you plan on winning it, didn't you? Onyx continued. I did, Ace admitted. So, if the other individual wins the major before you, that would spoil your plans. Fair to say? I mean, I wouldn't put it exactly like that. Sure, it's a little blunt, said Onyx, but regardless, it's the truth, isn't it? Yeah, it is, said Ace. And sometimes the truth hurts, doesn't it, Captain? That's what they say, replied Ace. Sometimes the truth isn't fair, is it? Said Onyx. Life isn't fair. We don't always get what we want, do we, Captain? We don't, replied Ace. Now then, tell us, Onyx went on. Who is the one individual who has who has 2 more awards over you? Who's that one individual who's major award eligible? Who's that person who stands to win the award before you? Who's that individual that potentially has only one more competition to go before finally being deemed successful? Who is that individual, Captain? Tell us, who? Ace growling, glaring at Onyx. It's you, said Ace through grinding teeth, mumbling throughout the arena. Captain, I want to ask you, said Onyx, standing proper and plush at the podium. Is your testimony still that you have no personal interest in the outcome of this trial? He continued. Yeah, that's still my testimony. Even if me winning the trial results in you never winning the major? Ace nodded. So you're not here to simply cause me to lose, are you? Consequently ending Mr. Conway's life, said Onyx. I'm just here telling the facts, replied Captain Ace. You claim to have seen what happened on the day in question, right? Onyx continued. I did see what happened. And you must have a pretty good view across the room to see all this, right? Said Onyx. Ace shrugged. I couldn't see it without seeing it. Yeah, replied Ace. And you have to have attention. You have to pay attention in order to see and remember something like that, don't you? I mean, yeah, I guess, Ace answered. Tell us, Captain, what color was the black man's trench coat? Black fedora man's trench coat. There was a pause, Ace gulping, tugging his own collar, and who replied, It was black. Gasps, while Onyx slapped the podium. Slipping around it, he stabbed a finger at Ace. The truth of the matter is, you didn't see any of this happen, did you, Captain? Onyx exclaimed. No, I told you what I saw. I saw it. You didn't see any of it, boomed Onyx over Ace. You didn't because you weren't doing your job that day, were you? Continued Onyx. No, I was doing my job. I always am, shouted Ace. You were too busy helping those children, weren't you? Said Onyx, jolting his finger. I did both, replied Ace. You didn't do both, said Onyx. And you didn't see any of what happened, of what you claimed to have seen, because you were too busy protecting those miserable children from the goddamn stampede, continued he. No, I mean, yeah, but you wanted to be the hero, didn't you? The guy who saved all the kids. Yeah, but, I mean, no, well, did you want to protect those children, didn't you? Said Onyx. I mean, yeah, I did, but said Ace. But you couldn't stand to see me win the war before you, could you? No, that's not true. You couldn't stand it, Captain. So you came up here to lie, didn't you? No, I didn't. I'm telling you the truth, cried Ace. The truth speaks for itself, doesn't it, Captain? It does, but you didn't write a report, correct? Said Onyx. I didn't, and you had an entire year to write it, didn't you? Yeah, but and I'm the one that had to point out that you weren't on duty that day, right? Said Onyx. Yeah, but you said this incident happened a long time ago, said Onyx. I did, so how do you remember everything? I just do. It was an exciting incident, replied Ace, flat mouth. What have I told you, Captain? Said Onyx. That each witness who testified about the trench coat before you said the trench coat was silver. What do you say to that? Continued Onyx. Ace shrugged, frowning. I don't know, replied Ace. Would those persons be lying? Said Onyx. I don't know if I'd say they're lying, replied Ace. Are you privy to any other witness in this case having a motive to lie? Onyx continued. I'm not aware of any witness having a motive. No. So, they were all just mistaken. Is that what you're saying? Said Onyx. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it, answered Ace. Just so I'm clear, Onyx elaborated. Your testimony is that all the witnesses who said the trench coat was silver are simply mistaken, he continued. Yeah, it sounds like it. And so, you're the only witness telling us the coat's correct color. Is that what you're saying? Replied Onyx. I guess so, yeah, Ace responded, shrugging. Tell us, what day were you formally endorsed by the city as a witness in this trial, Captain? Last Wednesday, I believe, Onyx smirked. And Tom Dibble made the announcement that the trial was a competition how many days before you were endorsed? He said. Ace snarled at him. He said it the day before, replied Ace, glaring. No further questions, said Onyx, twirling around, striding out the spotlight, vanishing into the dark. It was at that very moment, however, that the entire world slowed down on him, like things were moving in slow motion all of a sudden, as he glanced at the keys to his left. A ghostly hollow moan as he squinted at them, all 12 keys sitting like blank-faced mummies in the key box, as if the keys themselves were part of the black mirror, each key eerily masked behind their skin-tight sculpies, like executioners. Only their poking noses and sunken eye sockets revealed, their faces following Onyx as he glared at them, snarling, striding back to his table, dropping to his seat next to the only glowing red ring in all the arena, while Lord Orin slammed the gavel. Keys? Lord Orin announced. Onyx sat silent at the table, watching all 12 keys jerk their blank faces at Orin. The fate of Mr. Conway's life is now in your hands, Orin continued, each key nodding discreet. You will each have 30 seconds to make your decision, continued Orin. Without warning, there was a loud metal clank. Spotlights blinked off. The entire arena blacked out. Then a soft metal clank. Onyx glancing at the key box, and the key box illuminated by 12 specks of cool blue-white lights for reading and writing, each key scribbling on miniature notepads under the respective lights. Onyx's awkward purple eyes cutting through the darkness and gawking intently at the keys. Mr. Conway's breath heaving. 30 seconds passed. A soft metal clank. The arena went black. Then a loud metal clank, and the entire arena lit. Have you reached a decision? Inquired Orin from the judge's bench. Everyone in the arena sitting silent, spying at each key, nodding at Orin. Very well then, Orin continued, dipping a chin at Lindy Lynn, who was standing next to the key box. Lindy? Lindy nodded back, and she collected the miniature notepads from each key, strutting down the courtroom towards Lord Orin's bench. Her glossy white heels sinking into the plush blue carpet. She hiked up 3 steps behind the bench, offering the notepads to Orin, who snatched them from her. Orin tossing on a pair of old man reading glasses. Silence, and the air became thick. Orin shuffling through the notepads one by one, Onyx balling his hands atop the table, twiddling his thumbs, glancing to his right, and at Mr. Conway. Conway's neck glistening wet, and whose breath was heaving, and whose eyes were locked on Orin. Onyx took a breath, wheeling back to the judge's bench, observing Orin's eyes stretching wider and wider with each passing note. Onyx sat back, exhaling, rubbing his sweaty palms, his heart thumping in his chest, thumping in his head, watching Orin's eyes still growing bigger as Orin reached the last notepad. Orin flung back in the chair, gasping, glancing at the keys. Orin spun, gawking at Onyx. Onyx perked up, wide-eyed, thinking to himself, holy shit, I did it, as Mr. Conway perked up beside him. Orin sitting flabbergasted atop the bench, eyeing Onyx, and Orin's mouth smacking as if Orin were trying to speak. This is it, thought Onyx to himself excitedly, clenching his fist in his lap. I can't believe it, said Orin, smiling, but then who frowned all of a sudden, turning and glancing back up at the fat purple sphere. Orin turned back, wheeling a glance at Mr. Conway. Onyx, meanwhile, eagerly scooching forward in the seat, as did thousands of fans throughout the arena. Gawking slack-jawed at Orin, many other fans clasping their hands in a prayer. Mr. Conway, said Lord Orin in a serious tone. Please rise, Orin continued. At once, Conway rocketed up from the seat. While the arena took a breath, there was a pause, Conway's chest heaving in and out. Mr. Conway, said Orin, I'm about to read to you the official verdict form. Understood? Mr. Conway nodded vehemently, while Orin gulped, and he tugged at his own collar, as Mr. Conway did, and as Onyx did too, for that matter. Onyx squeezing his fist tighter and tighter, grinning under the light before glancing up at the fat purple sphere and snarling at it. Okay, then, here we go, said Orin, exhaling and pulling the main verdict form close. We the keys, continued Orin, reading from the paper, Onyx clenching his fist tighter, his knuckles burning red. After having been duly sworn under oath, and after having heard all the evidence in this matter, do find as follows, Orrin went on. Onyx tugging his collar, biting his bottom lip, grinning, Conway trembling next to him. That as to count one, conspiracy to commit escape, said Orrin. Onyx hinged forward over the table. We the keys, continued Orrin, Onyx balling his fist. Find the defendant, Colt Conway, Onyx biting his bottom lip, juddering his fists, Orrin taking a breath, when suddenly, guilty, boomed throughout the arena, rocking the building like how beads dance on a smashing drum, rattling walls, shooting popcorn and drinks up, whiplashing fans. Onyx launched to his feet at the same time Conway dropped to the chair. The godly, all-consuming voice roared, guilty and death, F. Screams and moans around the arena, fans with tragic faces dropping to their seats. Onyx's brow furrowed as he glared at the fat purple sphere bulging violently out the obelisk structure at him before the voice boomed one last time, guilty. Onyx squeezing his fist, biting his bottom lip, a stream of hot pink liquid snaking down his chin. He released his open fists. A flash of gold and his coin of accomplishment dropped to the carpet. Thank you for listening, even if it's just me listening to myself. Thank you, future Corey.